Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are around the world. Let me start by welcoming you to this Africa in Perspective webinar, Spotlight on Somalia. My name is Dr. Andrew Chi, a Senior Fellow for Africa Security and the Obasanjo Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Our first session will focus on Somalia's forthcoming elections. Recent talks in Somalia saw the federal government and some regional leaders reach an agreement upon an upcoming elections. Each lawmaker will be elected by 301 delegates in a system called ECC. However, federal member states from Puntland and Jubaland were absent from talks. Both member states later released a joint statement arguing that the agreement which had been reached between federal government and other federal member states they were not party to. What remains clear is that it's up to Somali and the Somali people and stakeholders to determine a model that will guide the upcoming electoral process, and this should be reached through inclusive dialogue and compromise. Today, I have the pleasure of opening up the first session with Her Excellency Halima Ismail Ibrahim, Chair of the National Independence Electoral Commission in Somalia. Her Excellency was a former lecturer at the Somali National University School of Agriculture, where she specialized in agroeconomy and rural development. She previously worked for the United Nations operations in Somalia and has worked as a political officer assisting with their operations across the country. She's an advocate for women's political leadership and their inclusion in decision-making. She's also a founding member of the Somali Leadership Initiative. Our second panelist is Mohammed Malum, who is a former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. He was the former Director General of the Directorate of National Statistics within the Ministry of Planning and International Cooperation, and a former senior advisor to the Ministry of Interior and Federal Affairs. Our third panelist is Abdinissa Ismail, an investigative journalist who is well known for his investigative research into the political establishment in Somalia. He has spent several decades as an advocate calling for reforms within Somalia. And finally, Makamus, who is an advocate with a group called A Brighter Somalia and works with women groups across the country. So without further waiting, I'll open the floor for remarks from Her Excellency Halima Ibrahim, then into Mohammed, Abdinissa, and Maka. Your Excellency.
Good afternoon, everyone who is here and the participants who are part of this, listening part of this organizing. And I really thank the organization who organized this with suits. I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to organizers and the members on this panel. The upcoming Somali election has a historical significance since Somalia formally became an independent state in 1960. Universal suffrage elections were conducted twice in 1964 and 1969. The essential element for promoting and sustaining democracy, including political parties and the constitutional, was suspended following the 1969 military coup and 22 years of military rule and a decade-long civil war when clan-based faction failed to agree on a power sharing. Because no elections were held in the past 50 years, the majority of the current Somali population have never had the opportunity to exercise their universal rights to political participation. Currently, Somalia has an estimated population of over 2 million, with up to 70% aged under 30. Furthermore, there's a large population of internally displaced people living in major cities across all federal member states. For this reason, this upcoming election is important for Somalia's democratization process and the Somali citizens whose rights to political participation have been denied for too long. The upcoming electoral process agreed in Somalia 3 is a small step in that direction. Unfortunately, the proposed election model does not contain any element of a direct election so that the Somali citizen can participate in choosing their leaders by casting their vote directly for the candidate of their choice, and which is their fundamental rights. However, it's also important to have a political consensus and agreement on the electoral model by all of the stakeholders. So far, the federal government of Somalia, 3 of the 5 federal member states, and the leadership of Benadir has agreed to this proposed electoral model. It is our hope that the other 2 FMS, Puntland and Jubaland, will join the discussion and support the agreement. It's also important that discussion be held with other stakeholders such as the temporary political parties, civil society, and the parliament to get their support. Various stakeholders say the election must be held on time, but already we are behind schedule. Even today, as we speak, agreement is still required with the other 2 FMS. We have yet to hear from civil society, and the electoral model has yet to be endorsed by parliament. Elections take time to organize. A huge amount of work is required to organize elections so that they are held in a fair and credible manner. Electoral materials have to be ordered, such as ballot boxes, ballot papers, polling booths, and delegates have to be registered in advance. Regulations have to be drafted, approved, and applied. The 2216 process took over a year to organize, and it wasn't a smooth process. There were many challenges in organizing that selection process. What we are tasked with doing now is implementing an expanded version of 2016 model, another indirect election process. It means that the delegates of each seat will be 301 members from the clan that shares the seat, and there are 275 seats in the House of the People. This will mean over 80,000 delegates will be involved in the indirect election. The logistic to make the arrangement requires both time and funding. Elections for the upper house have also to be arranged, as this will be indirectly elected to the federal member states parliamentarians. All elections are to be held on the same day. Although the 2016-2017 clan model has facilitated an indirect election for members of the parliament and the presidency, at the federal level, the process was dominated by extensive vote buying, a lot of corruption, a lot of disagreement and mistrust, and limited participation of women and marginalized and minority groups, and almost a complete exclusion of internal displaced people. I want to reiterate that the clan power sharing agreement was a model initially designed as a temporary measure to support the transitional government of Somalia to prepare the country for a one person, one vote election. It's for this reason that the Somali political leaders reached agreement at all various conferences over the past decades to implement direct election and to end the clan-based power sharing model. Additionally, it was worth nothing that any model of election that doesn't allow the Somali public the opportunity to exercise their rights to vote it against the Somali constitution and the various human rights conventions that Somalia has ratified. Article 46 of the Provision Constitution specifically stipulates the public representation system shall be open and shall give everyone the opportunity to participate. Its procedures and rules shall be simple and understandable. And I have to say for my first interrupt on this small, and I want to share to this small concept. Thank you. It's over to you. Thank you very much. I will respond the questions that we have to answer later.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Mohammed?
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Go for it, Mohammed. You might need to share your video as well because we can't see you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And thanks to my fellow panelists, and thanks to Her Excellency Halima for that good remarks. I just want to start with a brief background of where we are and where we come from, and then move on to the current situations in Somalia. Most of you now would know that since Al-Shabaab was driven out from Mogadishu in 2011, there was steady state building and peace building efforts in the country. President Sheikh Sharif laid foundations for the next government of President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. A permanent government was then established after 2 decades of anarchy. It was a milestone. It was his government that established federal member states with the exception of Puntland, who pre-existed other FMSs. And this is actually something to note for because it actually lays the foundations of where we are at the moment. It was this great efforts and sacrifice of former governments that prepared the current president to be elected. Somali people welcomed this successful, peaceful handover of power, and it became a glimpse of hope that people of Somalia expect a timely election. And that's very, very, very important. This is what we had over the last 10 years and so. Current president threatened that already fragile democracy by fighting federal member states and opposition parties, and to anyone who has different opinions as to where the country was heading. It's not secret what happened in regional elections in the southwest of state of Somalia, Jubaland and Galmudug, which was later saved and compromised by its own people. Somali people were led to believe by then that universal suffrage or one person, one vote would take place in 2021. Her Excellency Halima just mentioned that. And we know that was not possible in the end. To be honest, it was a never starter to begin with. And there was no civil registration and vital statistics. Security situation is not that good. And state institutions were not capacitated to be able to allow this. As well as lack of huge infrastructure and capacity issues. So we know that by then that it was never going to be possible. So why waste it all that time? As we know, the electoral bill was passed to the parliament in May 2019. That's after 30 months of submission. So what has the government been doing about this? I know the Electoral Commission have done their work and whatever, but these require a political solutions and political agreement. To be honest, those political agreement was never there and was never intended to do. And Somali people need answers for that. Recently, we know that the former Prime Minister lost a vote of confidence by the parliament last July. We also know that it was not constitutionally right. We spoke about that publicly. It was very dubious. It was very strange. And just under a few minutes or 7 minutes, whatever people say, that the former Prime Minister was ousted. It's irony that the Prime Minister himself didn't also uphold this constitution that brought him to office. In the end, it's the same constitution that was used against him and manipulated. And simply because he didn't protect that constitution and didn't lead by an example. So what happened? The same constitution was exploited, was used against the former Prime Minister. It still makes an illegal. But the top leadership should take responsibility of the constitution that we all adhere to. Recently, after 3.5 years of political disagreements, the current government realized that a compromise and a political agreement was needed. Thanks to Galmudug State, who hosted Galmudug Dusamreb 1 and 2, and now 3. Dusamreb 3, between 15 and 20 of August, all the parties involved came to a compromise. This was the first breakthrough that the Somali people have been waiting for. Nevertheless, in order this agreement to be successful, what do we need? We actually need all the political stakeholders, including federal member states, including political parties, including civil societies, including Somali people, wherever they are, wherever representation they come, to agree to this. If they don't, what happens? We know what happens. It cannot be implemented. It will fail. So now we have a way forward. So what do we do with this way forward? If you go through all the points that have been agreed, I'm not going to list it here because it will take all day, that all the items that have been agreed in Dusamreb 3 needs to guarantee a timely election without delay that also guarantees political stability and good governance. This is what opposition parties stand for, and certainly what the Wajir party stands for. It's already been mentioned, this indirect election, meaning that there has to be a political agreement among all stakeholders. If there's no political agreement, then it's very hard to see what's going to happen after that. Again, in order to do some Dusamreb agreement, and I mean Dusamreb 3 agreement to be successful, following things has to happen. We need to define who are the traditional elders and what they stand for. We need to define the civil society groups. We need to define and clarify processes followed by electoral delegates and designated seats for each candidate. The 275 committee members need to limit electoral delegates no more than agreed. And therefore, we don't have that agreement so far. We have 301, but with the missing other parties, it can still be negotiated, and we definitely have an agreement for that. So we need those agreements to be able to better manage this process. Federal member states need to allocate 2 election centers, at least 2 election centers for fair election in order to avoid corruption and vote rigging practices. There has to be an election committee endorsed by all stakeholders, including federal member states and political parties. The federal member election committee has a key role to play in that and has to be the facilitation of that. Again, it has to be a political agreement as a result of that. We will need an oversight independent committee that ensures things like mismanagement, corruption, and vote rigging does not take place. Unfortunately, these situations is easily to be exploited and very easily mismanaged. So in order to avoid that, we need all political stakeholders, civil society, and other forms of society to be on board on this process. Otherwise, we will be looking at into very unstable routes of re-elections in Somalia. And by the way, elections has to happen on time, it has to be inclusive, and it has to be good faith. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mohammed. And Abdinissa? Abdi, you're muted.
I do apologize because I've got very bad internet, so I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Please go for it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rusi. My fellow panelists, Chair of the National Independence Electoral Commission, Her Excellency, Dr. Halima Ismail. I mean, I'm focusing more the remark Her Excellency made 26th of June 2020 the time I was present at the lower house of the parliament when Halima Ismail delivered long-awaited remark about upcoming Somali general election. The chairperson had told the lower house of the parliament that the political differences in security, flooding, and COVID-19 have hampered the commission's work schedule at the time. The parliamentarian elections were scheduled for November 27. As we all know, the president term expires on February 8, 2021. Her Excellency says neither deadline can be met. That's what she said at the time. The chairperson said that biometric registration is necessary for holding a popular election as stated in electoral law cannot be completed in time. She also mentioned buying registration equipment, securing registration sites, conducting public awareness, registering voters, issuing lists of voters, registering political parties, and the candidates, among other tasks, need more time and budget. Election based on biometric system is not possible to be held according to the scheduled time of November 27, 2020, due to the reason mentioned above. Elections take place and that election will be held nationwide on the same day, if that is a possibility. Leaders also resolved to hold indirect election in Somaliland, other regional assemblies, elected member, house, so and so. But the most important thing is, after these things happen, I was actually in Lusmareb 1 and 2, then we had this now famous Lusmareb 3, without Puntland and Jubaland, which did not attend latest talk of election. On a country remains mired at the moment political turmoil since the Somali parliament was ousted former Prime Minister Hassan Ali Khaire July the 20th. What I was trying to say now is political stability is very important for Somalis to achieve a fair and free election. I will be asking questions after. Political stability between federal government and the state members are the key to achieving long-term goals of stability and development. Without political will from both parties, nothing is going to work. So Somalis need to come together and create environment where they can agree how to hold fair and free election. At the moment, Somalia is in crossroads. Political squabble is creating a toxic environment which can be unpredictable and extremely dangerous. The long-term solution for these important issues are for Somali federal government and member states to have an honest discussion of where the country is heading. At the moment, the political situation in Somalia is polarized to achieve a long-term. So political stability is for member states and federal government to engage a sustainable political discourse. Somalia is, as we know, it's a fragile state, and the fundamental cause of the conflict lies Somalis' bitter clan rivalries. Unless solution is found, it will be almost impossible to achieve long-term political solution, stability, and a fair and free election. Somalis are currently living a period of deep insecurity, power struggle, and competing visions about political, economic, religious, and social and cultural order have triggered destructive cycle of exclusion, violence, and war. The end. The fractured Somali political elite consists of 4 different groups, all which have failed to put in common interests ahead of their own and ready to do everything to stay in power regardless of the consequences. 2 of them obviously come from traditional camp, which is the combination of religious clerics, clan elders. Their existence and powers are divine and justified either by the mosque, fatwa, or norms and customary laws. The clan elders camp remains the most dominant and plays a critical role in elections, particularly in parliament elections at both the regional and a national level. 2 other groups are Somali government and the international community. Despite continuing effort to free the election process from them, they still remain decisive in the process of picking the members of parliament. This exists partially because of the traditional structure that Somalis continues to rely on, which indeed provides only informal consistent. Sending back to Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Maka.
Hi there, Lucy. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go for it.
Okay. It's my pleasure to take the opportunity to share my views on the political situation of Somalia right now, especially focusing on Somali elections. I think maybe me being the younger version, the youngest person here, I have a different understanding on the elections that are happening in Somalia. When it comes to us maybe being a bit naive on what kind of elections that can happen in Somalia. I think when the job that our Excellence Halim Yere is doing now and has been doing, it's remarkable, but with what she's been given. We were told that we would have an election which would be one man, one vote. I think that was a bit unrealistic on the situations that we have in our country right now. And you would know that majority of the people in Somalia right now don't know what an election is. They probably don't know what government is or have nothing to do with politics. Our people in Somalia, I think majority of them being the young people have been born into civil war, gone through Islamic groups, and now trying to understand what a government is and how governments are run. I think Somalia now is going towards a brighter future, even though it has a lot of people who's trying to pull them back. The situation with our federal governments not working together is basically putting us back 10 steps back. And I believe that when Somalia takes one step wrong, it puts you 10 steps back. And with our president Formaggio, I think he's trying really hard to put this country through an election, even though he has a lot of obstacles which he's facing. I think that us trying to get everybody on board on getting elections done and it not happening on time. You will see a lot of people in Somalia that say, oh, everybody in Somalia likes to talk about politics or want to be involved in politics. You see a lady sitting in her vegetable stall trying to talk about elections and not happening. It's not because they are politicians, but it's because if the politics in Somalia does not go how it's meant to go and anything goes wrong, it will affect them. It will depend on them coming out in the morning and sitting on that stall doing their daily livelihood. That is what it's not. We can't compare our political situations. Like I'm in the UK right now. When elections are happening in the UK, they go through a certain process, but that's not the case with Somalia. Somalia's armed forces are very weak. Its police force is very weak. Somalia is the country which depends on African unions to keep the peace in the country. And it's a country economic-wise depends on donors to help them out in order for them to run. So I'm happy to be involved in progress that Somalia is making right now. Somalia has come a long way and it's still moving forward. And I'm hoping that our country from now keeps moving on and not be set back. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Okay, so I thank you, Andrew, for letting me be part of this group. Maybe my political views are not the same as the others on the panel, but I am just hopeful. I'm a human rights activist, and as you know, Somalia doesn't have human rights right now, and I'm hopefully waiting for that to change. And I thank you for letting me be on here and talking. So I'll turn it back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Maka. So I guess, look, there are lots of questions that are coming in at the moment, and I want to move the conversation forward. And I guess for me, the first question, if you may, Your Excellency, is how do we move away from a model that is the sort of clan-based model to a model that is more inclusive and incorporates the groups that you talked about, the women groups, the IDP groups, as part of a political process that moves the whole of Somalia forward.
Am I going to start?
Yes, Your Excellency, yes.
Thank you. And first of all, I'll try to summarize the first question. And I will say, to realize the Somali people's democratic aspiration. First of all, the NIC was established in 2015 to prepare the country for direct election, so that all citizens will have the right to participate in election, the right to vote, the right to choose their leaders. The people of Somalia have put their trust in NIC. Therefore, conducting a fair and credible election is that at heart of NIC value and influences our strategic decision-making. When I'm saying that, we are with the people, we go everywhere, we go every region, every district. We have been talking to the people, and we documented all of that the people of Somalia, they are tired of waiting 20 years to not having an election, that the government which has been formed to not go toward this establishing and preparing an election for the people. People are tired, and we cannot say all the time and repeat all the time that Somali are not ready, the country is not safe, there is no census. We are not the first country who doesn't have census, and they are conducting election without census because there is biometric voter registration. You will target, NIC is going to target people who can vote, not all the Somalis. They are not targeting the whole number of Somalis. They are targeting those who can vote, and that can be registered. Election, people who are saying election cannot happen, they have minimum understanding of electoral process. First, you have to read, study, see what it can happen and what it cannot happen. So they have minimum understanding of electoral. 5 years ago, I had minimum understanding of electoral, although I was ahead from the other people because I have worked with other election processes in Somalia, 2 election processes. So I had minimum understanding, but election can happen. It says also that election and could be implemented the area which are securable. So all our security, we have to put in that securable area and conduct the election. We are not saying that we are going to hold election everywhere in Somalia. And even in UK, who goes to vote? What is the turnout of the people who are voting? Are all UK people are coming and vote? That's another question to understand. As the constitutional mandate body, because NIC is a constitutional mandate body, the responsibility is to conduct the federal member states parliament election and the federal president election. That is the mandate. So that's a mandate. It has been prepared for a long time for that. And as the constitutional mandate body, the NIC has been making preparation for holding the first one person, one vote election, which was supposed to have been held this year. The first such directed election in Somalia in over 50 years. And 20 years, the government, they were supposed to prepare this election. This is the first time that has been prepared election. Because there's a need to have a political consensus on the electoral model. Always we need a political consensus. We are a country which is coming out from a conflict. Somalia, they kill each other. The thirst is limited. So always it needs a political agreement. Even though the electoral law was passed by consensus in our parliament in February this year, other stakeholders were of the view that the country is not yet ready for a direct electoral process. For the past 5 years, our international partners have been assisting NIC to build the capacity of our staff to enable them to conduct a fair and credible election that aligns with international electoral standards. With the assistance of our partners, we have put in place measures to promote the integrity of election, developing structure and procedures for ensuring transparency and accountability, formulating procedures for creating equality space for political parties to conduct their campaign, putting in place strategies and structures for creating a conducive environment to enable election be held safely, putting in place an election dispute resolution mechanism. As NIC, in order to have an election, and if I look back the agreement of Lusumereb 3, the most important is, first of all, that the election will be run by political parties. Political parties, they must be there, because the political parties will be a mechanism that we can minimize this clan division of Somalia. When the people come to the parliament, they will be associated by political parties, not by the clan, which is happening now. It is divided the parliament in 4.5. But if we go by political, this political party will have different clans, and those different clans, they will have one ideology to defend to all. So that is first step that we think. Having more places, more polling stations, not only one, not only two. One, we have seen the corruption that we had, the isolation of the people we have, how has been discriminated women and the minority. We know all of that. We want to reach more people. We wanted to go more places in order to minimize. I'm not saying that we could eliminate everything, but in order to minimize the corruption, the money, we know how money will run. So NIC is working for all. NIC, it's not for the federal government, it's not for the federal member states. NIC is there for the Somali people, and to avoid those who are saying that election has to happen timely. It was June when we went to the parliament and we said election has to happen timely, but still we don't have agreement. People are not coming with healthy idea, and everyone is saying election has to happen on time. That story and theory doesn't help. We want to practice, and people, they must, in my view, they should say it has to start the process now, instead of saying it has to happen on time. On time, it's something that we cannot understand. It's not happening on time. Even if we say today we go, everyone can go to do the election, we cannot do it on time. And I say it in the parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Any comments from the floor? I just want to make sure before we go to the next question, because there are a few questions that I want to try and address.
Can we ask a question, Dr. Halima? Andrew, I'm asking.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask chairperson of NIC. She mentioned that UK, obviously UK, and we cannot compare to United Kingdom and Somalia. The last election held in Somalia was March, I think, 1969. My question is, if opposition parties don't agree with a technical extension, whatever reason, what will happen? That's one question. And secondly, without regional powerhouse of Jubaland and Puntland, do you think a viable, fair, and free election will happen in Somalia?
I think I answered that question before. We need a political consensus. Political parties, still we don't have a permanent political parties. They are political parties. They are part of the society, and we need their suggestions and giving us directions, yes. But I responded before, we need a consensus on this, because Somali, they must be all together. That's what I believe.
I'm going to move slightly forward or slightly on because there are obviously questions coming through. And the first question really which has been asked is directed again to Your Excellency, but asking how we keep the 82,000 delegates, that you mentioned earlier, safe during any elections that we were intended to have in Somalia. So particularly because the person says, or goes on to say, the previous ones in 2016 are either being killed or have fled. So how do we keep the 82,000 delegates that we hope to participate in this election, if there is an election, safe? You're muted there, Your Excellency, sorry.
Sorry. First of all, we were in work. The number is not, the committees where they will not, the electoral college, they will not be 80,000 or 82. We are going to cut it, the Somaliland delegates. So in the Somali delegates, it's not going to be formed committees. It will follow what the electoral law says, how to elect the Somaliland seats. So it will be cut in that number. So I think 70,000 and something will be the remaining. And that is what we really already started working on it. And we formed a committee in our NIC, and we are sitting with our experts how it can be possible this. So that's a work that already we started to do it, to find out how to do, how it will be easy, who to contact, where these people will find, who they will be, those people, and always it will be with the consultation of the federal member states, as the agreement is stating. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question, really, and I'll throw that out to Mohammed and possibly Maka as well. So do get ready with your responses. The question is asking whether or not the fact that the question says, can you comment on the fact that we are still without a permanent prime minister yet? Is this vital to moving Somalia forward? And has the president broken the constitution? So I throw that to Mohammed and then to Maka in your view and back.
Yeah, thank you so much. I already mentioned in my remarks that not having a prime minister in this crucial time only shows the real intention of this current government, because constitutionally the president is the total oversight of the government, but the person that's expected to implement all the key decisions of the government is the prime minister. So if there's no prime minister in place, then who's going to do all of that? And the timing could not get more crucial this time. We only have less than 6 months of the mandated government mandate, including the parliament this time. And we know the conditions that led to the ousting of the former prime minister. So our main concern is that not only the president is actually breaking the constitution, but also playing very dangerous delaying tactics. But also you have to know that having a prime minister in place also signifies that political power sharing agreement that was done many years ago. And the fact is that is missing at the moment, and it has not been resolved or even been discussed, is a dangerous path. And this is what we appeal as a party, that a prime minister must be appointed, not today, but as soon as possible.
Maka.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think with naming a new prime minister, it's not as when the president was new, he had wiggle room, which he could look around and see which kind of guy would be suited to become prime minister. I think the time that he has now is a very sensitive time, which means that the prime minister that does come now only has a couple of months to set up his ministers and to get the country ready for elections and to run the rest of the country. I think the president has a very hard time now on choosing who to put out there and name as the prime minister. I think the president is trying his best to find somebody that is suited to come as a prime minister. I think a lot of the Somali people see the short side of naming a prime minister. Naming a prime minister is not an easy job. It's not something which can just come on, especially at the sensitive time that we are in now, and at the sensitive of our country. I think our president has his work cut out for him, and I hope he makes the right choice in choosing a new prime minister which can help him to move the country forward.
Should he be looking towards a female prime minister this time around?
I see a female prime minister, but I don't think the Somali people at the stage that we are in now and what we are trying to do now, that we are ready for a female prime minister. But I would love for a female prime minister to come on.
Do I have a question, please?
Sure, Abdi Musa, do you want to go for the question?
Thank you. I want to say hi to Rusi and Andrew and the organizers and hosts, and also the panelists. And Your Excellency Halima, how are you?
I'm okay, very well. Thank you, Abdi. Welcome.
I'm going to ask you a very tough question now, so bear with me, please. Everyone in Somalia is talking about political corruption, and now even some people are calling it a market for especially election time. There's a lot of money going around. Is there anything in your mind or actually on the pipeline or something already existing, a statute, a law of some sort that limits the amount of money candidates, political parties, individuals could spend? Any declaration of any sort of how much limitation? Could we put something like that in place? And anybody who breaches that will have a severe consequence of the law in the land in the harshest form, and that will reduce political buy-in and political corruption. And that is very essential for good governance in Somalia. So do we have that in place? Are we thinking about it to limit? If you want to spend the money, if you're a candidate of political party, declare it. And this is the limit that the law allows in this country. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Abdi. This is a tough question because
I know, I told you.
We're aware, and you know that by this time, and the mind of the people is there are a lot of questions. What will happen? How many money will come in the country? Who is going to bring the country? Already the people, they start their suspicions. But first of all, as a NIC, we work on rules and regulations always. And we set up a really and very, very concrete code of conduct to adopt. And as you know, and the corruption will come in the field. Those who are working in the election, the staff who are working in the election. And the staff, they are not coming from the sky. They are our people. They are the people who live in that place, which we are having the polling stations. And I got an experience when I was in observing the election in Nigeria. People who are conducting the election, people who are working the election, the temporary workers on the election are selected by together the political parties, the election commission, and now in our case we have the federal government and federal member states. So a lot of people has to be involved when we are selecting those who are conducting the election. and in the field, in the election, in the polling station, the small polling station, we have the presence of NIC, those who are well trained and have been trained for a long time. There will be the observers and, or I could say the agents of the political parties. The political parties are very important in the election. They are the ones who own the election. They are the ones who are competing the election, not the federal government or federal member states, but the crucial edge and organ is the political parties. They should be there with their agents and have an open eyes. We will have observers, whether they are international, if they can go, and local observers. All the civil society must be there. We are going to have the media. Each of them will have a code of conduct. Each of them will have a regulations that they follow and work. Only in that way we can minimize. I can't say that we can eliminate because it's everywhere. It's not only Somali, it's the election is in all Africa. We know what happened. And the only thing that to minimize is that. And that is why NIC has been formed and has been trained for 5 years. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you
I
very
don't want to be satisfied or not.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We've got about 6 more minutes, so I want to take a few more questions. This question is to Maka, and the question is asking, what role do you think social media plays on the young people, and how can the young generation, in essence, need to move forward the elections in a democratic way, democratic and fair way, that will bring the country into the future, as you said? And is there a prevalence of fake news in Somalia as well? You're muted, Maka, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I think social media plays a great role in the politics of Somalia for the young people, especially in the Somali community. I think we have a lot of fake news. A lot of people like Abdel Nasser are the kind of people who do their research before they try and talk to the public. But we have a lot of people who use social media platform in order to spread fake news, like when it comes to our elections or when it comes to what progress our governments are making. I think a lot of the young people, if we do get the elections where we could get 300 people plus to vote for the political seats, I think that would give a lot of young people chances to go and run for seats, as in when the voting people are either you have the elders who signed for the people, or you have the 51, like the 51 people which last time was bought out. So I think it minimizes corruption and it gives opportunity for the young people to come out and run for seats, because as you know, a lot of young people don't have the kind of money to buy seats. And when it comes to moving forward on them being involved politically, I think a lot of the young people now are doing their research on politics and trying to get involved into being part of the political decisions that are being made in the country. And I think the government from Hassan Sheikh to the one now, which Farmajo is running, has given a lot of young people opportunity to be involved. And we are still, like when I moved to Somalia about 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of young people that were involved in the political stages of Somalia as in they are now. And I think the more chance and the more time that we do get, they will get a lot of people that we more involved into politics. I think that answers the question.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Abdinis, I wanted to throw a question at you. The question is, the person's asking, can it be considered a worthwhile democratic move to only target those who are able to vote, and in particular, those in secure areas? You're muted, by the way.
This is interesting question. Her Excellency was saying early, only secure area of Somalia it can be held this upcoming election. And it's true, because if somebody lives under under the government and they cannot vote, that would be really unfortunate that they cannot have their voices heard. So I'm really confused, because what we're hearing is one person, one vote. We don't know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And I'm going to read this statement, which is related to this question as well. Recently, after the Somalia is finished, the Somali government released a statement which says Farmaajo joined the leaders regional states of Galmudug Southwest, Hirshabelle, as well as the governor of Banaadir in Dusmareb, the capital of Galmudug. They agreed on the form electoral constituency caucuses, which is caucus consists of 301 delegates who will vote for a seat in parliament. The four leaders also resolved to establish at least 4 constituencies in each regional states where election takes place, and the election will be held nationwide on same day. One thing I don't understand in when, I'm asking as well this question, when this election is going to happen and where is it going to happen? And also, without Puntland and Jubilant agreement, do we think this election is going to happen? So if somebody lives one part of the country cannot have his or her voice heard, then I think that will not be a fair and free election. That's what I think.
Brilliant. Mohammed, do you want to come in on that last point before I wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, that's a very valid point, because we have been talking about inclusivity for the past 3.5 years. Inclusivity basically means in Somalia, it means different in English Cambridge dictionary, but in Somalia, it means a real inclusion of the stakeholders in the country. In our experience, that has been denied and has been the situation over the last 3.5 years. If you cannot agree with your constitutionally agreed federal member states onto what type of election and onto how many electoral delegates are you appointing to each seat, then I don't know how you can talk about a real inclusivity that allows people to vote and to come out vote or be voted in a good faith. It's not just going to happen. So what we really encourage is that come out of the closet, come in public, negotiate in good faith, be shown or show some good leadership, and be honest in the real negotiations, because we are literally playing on Somalia's future, and we are playing on the lives of future generations of Somalia. One thing that we lack at the moment, especially the current leadership of the government, is honesty and integrity, and telling the people of Somalia what is going to be happening in the next few months, fair and square. And that has to happen from the top leadership, period. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. And we've got 4 minutes left. So I'm going to ask each person to give me, in the shortest possible way, 30 seconds each, but just list, I guess, a few things that, in your opinion, or steps that need to be taken, the crucial steps and important steps to move things forward. So I'm going to start with Maka in reverse order, then I'll go to Abdi Nissa, Mohammed, and Her Excellency. Maka.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go for it.
I think for us to move forward, I think the Somali people need to come together. The Somali people need to have one vision and one view on where we are going. And I think they need to stop trying to hang one another and putting them out. And I think moving forward from now on, empowering the young people and putting the young people at the front will help Somalia move forward and create a new vision and a new light.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Abdinissa, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Again, I think I spent the last 6 months in Somalia, and as we all know, Somalia is a vast country, wonderful country, beautiful country, and the nicest people you can ever meet. And what we need is election. We need a democratic process. We need development. We need investment. We need education. We need health. We need minority people to be empowered. So this all depends on political stability within the country. Otherwise, there's a short history of this country. Last 10 years, there was a civil war. Loads of people died. What we don't need to go back there. What we need is political stability. People come together and create a good environment for the country and for the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mohammed?
Yeah, my final note is that the person in charge in Somalia is the current president. If you really want us to move forward, appoint Prime Minister by today, negotiate with federal member states, especially with Puntland and Jubaland, announce election dates, and come to the public. Simple as that.
Brilliant. And Your Excellency? Sorry, you're muted, Your Excellency.
Sorry. Before I go that, I would like to add a small thing about the media. In Somalia, it's very new for Somalia, the social media. And as NIC, we have trying to work with our large community in order to understand this issue and in order to use the social media for the positive purpose in order that we all move ahead, but not a distraction way. Somalia, in order to get out this problematic issue, it needs that they come all together and put their hands together. So the media, it has to be used in the goodwill, not in the destruction will. That's one thing that we are working. For me, and it was a long time to prepare this election, and our work was headed to have an one person, one vote election, and we believe that it is possible in Somalia to happen, at least to start. But everything is dependent in agreement. We need political agreement. We are a very fragile country, and it has to put it together all the time. We don't want to disperse. So, and this, the Dusamareb agreement, it is not what we were hoping. It is not something that takes really out of this destruction for Somalis. It is not an agreement that gives the Somalis their rights. We want to see more people voting. We want to have more polling stations, and we were prepared for that. We want at least to give the Somalis their right, to start now, to give some of their rights. But it is an agreement, and the agreement has to be completed as soon as possible. The parties, they must come together and release their last and this agreement to agree and to start the work as soon as possible. The process has to be started, cannot be held behind forever. And in the other hand, we cannot say that election has to happen on time. And this time, I am really sending a message to all Somalis and all leaders. This time has to be the last time that we are talking about indirect election. Somalia needs better of this, and we can do. We are prepared. And for the international community, I will send my message saying that you have been supporting Somalia for a long time. Support Somalia on the goodwill and make them possible that we go ahead and be ready for their contribution for this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Unfortunately, this brings us to the end of this session. We have one more session next. I would like to thank Her Excellency Halima Ismail, Ibrahim, Mohammed Mulam, Abdinissa Ismail, and Makamis for their contributions. Before we start the second session, we will hear from Ambassador Malam, who was the former Executive Secretary of IGAD. and currently the director of the Sahan Research Group. Your Excellency.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Chair and other organizers, plus the wonderful panelists that have spoken earlier. Special thanks goes to Her Excellency Dr. Halima Yeri, who I know well. Haven't seen her in a long time, but not too long. COVID period. I also thought I saw Her Excellency Professor Hodan. I don't see her anymore. I don't know whether she's still in the program.
She's on the next.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. So basically, to thank everybody and to at the onset say that I am a Somali speaker from northern Kenya. So this town where this last meeting took place, I'll refer to it as D3, because in northern Kenya we don't mention that activity loudly as my other Somali compatriots would mention. I don't know, Chia, whether you know the meaning, but I'll just go to the D3. Now let's start with the positives. Despite all this confusion, amidst the confusion, we as human beings normally, because of our emotions and the positions we take, sometimes miss out the positives. Now there are several positives in all this. In my view, compared to the last 2 years, Somalia seems to have to be out of the woods in the most critical area of the electoral process. That we have to appreciate. There's also been a concerted effort by everybody, Somali government, all the Somalis, everybody, even those who seem to be critical. This has been a concerted effort, but also the international community. And here, please allow me to single out the US government. I think it's as a result of the, in my view, the clear and the decisive position that the US government through its ambassador took in the last couple of months, that has in fact resulted and encouraged Villa Somalia, in my view, to realize that the buck stops with them as government of the day, therefore must be seen to cede grounds and to seize certain grounds, no doubt about it. At the same time, it is the same position that I think is very, came at the right time with a lot of appreciation from my side, that has also made the president of Puntland and Jubaland also, because of the guarantorship that they provided, also come on board. So those are also positives I think must be appreciated and definitely will steer the ship in the right direction. Also, as a positive, I have been informed, and I stand to be corrected, that recently, maybe the last couple of days, the Somali government has disbursed money to all the federal member states after a long, long time. Substantial amount of money. This also, in my view, is a positive from the federal government of Somalia, and it's a way of building trust, which is something that we also need. At the same time, His Excellency the President of Somalia, President Farmajo, I'm informed, is willing to go to Garowe, where the the other federal presidents are. So all these are positives that I think we fall upon them. We definitely will aim more for Somali people. The fact that having gone over the elephants in the room in all this, which was that there was an issue of extension of the period, and at the same time an election modality, whether or not it's going to vote things like those. So those two issues were the real issues that, despite many other differences, were the key issues that were discussed in D3, and an agreement has been reached. So this again is a positive. The two presidents of Jubaland and Puntland understand that this is quote unquote for those who who decided, for those who owned it, who attended the meeting. But as of yesterday, and they're still meeting in Garowe, they seem to be toning down their stand. And I would expect definitely that they will definitely come to some kind of an agreement on the way forward. They will not be far off generally from what has been agreed upon in the two areas. However, I'm almost sure that two issues will arise. I'm almost sure about that. Not that I can swear about it, but I mean, looking at the occurrence of events, and I'm sure these two issues will not only have the two presidents of Jubaland and Puntland on one side, but also have the opposition fully. As Dr. Halmayeri mentioned, they want an all-inclusive process. If that has to be achieved, even the other parties outside the Jubaland and Puntland will also be on the side of the president of Jubaland and Puntland. And what are these issues? One is the issue of the composition of the membership of the Electoral Commission. There's no doubt about it, that they are going to say, look, this is the composition is not right for us. Definitely there is the suspicion out in the market that this the Electoral Commission as is presently constituted is pro-government, and that people would call for changes. That I'm not sure is something that will be questioned. The other thing that I know will be questioned, and Dr. Halmayeri mentioned a little bit of it, is the fact that the venues or the electoral polling venues, what you call polling stations, for example, would also be questioned. And the reason is, of course, this has now gone to about 4 places as per D3, which I know some of the parties would question for many reasons. One is, of course, logistical issues, security issues, but also concerns arising out of the fact that some of the federal member states will feel that certain areas which are being earmarked as an electoral position venue would be under the direct control of the government, for example. So federal member states will feel this is intended to kind of lessen the probability of free and fair election for them. So that is an issue that I know is going to arise. But having said that, and look at the overall system in Somalia and what needs to be done, I would like to draw our attention to the fact that war, if there's a war, wars only end in a victory or in the availability of some kind of peace agreement. Now, in my view, Somalia does not have any. It has not won any war among itself. Neither is there really a peace agreement on any of these issues, because there are very many different core and finished businesses, and I will take 3 of these. One is the fact that we still have a constitution that is an unfinished constitution in Somalia. It is still a transition. It has several areas of contestation, and it is open for interpretation. And to borrow some of the examples, for example, somebody just mentioned about the appointment of the Prime Minister. Some people would say the current government is already unconstitutional because of the absence of Prime Minister, because of the time of the appointment has been passed. For example, others would say the lower house has no constitutional mandate to increase its tenure. It is the role of the upper house, for example. Others would say, if you listen to what federal member states and the upper house say, they're always quoting some constitutionality, rightfully or wrong, or this again open for interpretation. While the government basically makes a lot of statements, for example. So we do not know, and this is because of the fact that the constitution of Somalia is unfinished. So this is going forward something that is going to put a stop on the kind of arguments and problems that we're now seeing in future, right now and into the future. The other one is the whole aspect of federal architecture. And here, those of us who are involved in the setting up of the federal system of Somalia will really reminisce the importance of what that was, what was intended for, and we can enumerate the benefits that has accrued to the Somali people as a result of the existence of some of these federal member states. Unfortunately, some of them have resulted to be sore areas and the beginning of problems for the Somali people. So why? Because again, the architecture, the federal architecture, as has been envisaged before, has not been discussed. There has not been an all inclusivity in further discussion and sharpening what that means, and the mandate and the separation of power, for example. So it's still a loose architecture which requires to be done. And lastly, another list is now the domain of my sister, Dr. Halim, and this is establishment of an electoral system. Now here, the key here isn't about a law being passed, but to avoid changes at every opportunity where it presents itself. So the fact that this is not anchored, it's not been properly finalized, and that every time, including in the next government, for example, there will always be an opportunity for these changes, is itself a danger area for the Somalis, and therefore it requires to be changed, for example. And lastly, on the list, the area of security, for example, which we say, it is very important, and of course we always prioritize it as important. But you can see, I'm putting it as the fourth tier, because even with security, without the necessarily establishment of the three core areas, then it doesn't work really. So it is also a panacea for better security improvement for these other three areas to be finalized. So I think this is, in my view, the way forward, and we look forward for best case scenario for Somalia. Thank you.
For those of you just joining us, my name is Dr. Andrew Chi, a senior fellow with the Royal United Services Institute. We've just finished a productive first session on Somalia's forthcoming elections. And this was followed by a message from His Excellency, former head of or executive secretary of IGAD. And on our final panel, we'll examine how we create a space for dialogue in Somalia. And on this next panel, I have the honor of having on this panel Dr. Hodan Saidissa, who is an assistant emeritus professor at the University of Buffalo School of Management. She has researched and presented several papers on national resource sharing, conflict dynamics, and mechanisms for the UNDP. Dr. Holden formerly served as lead economist for the state of Virginia for 5 years and has acted as a goodwill ambassador for the UNFPA, UNICEF on gender equality and maternity issues as well. Our second panelist is Abdi Muse, who is the CEO of Friends of the Horn Foundation. Abdi has over 29 years experience in development work across Kenya, Somalia, Denmark, and the UK. He has worked for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, UNHCR, Danish Refugee Council, and several local authorities in the UK. Our third panelist is Abdulaziz Bilal, who is an international freelance journalist based in the Horn of Africa. He has worked for a number of international media outlets, including VOA, DW, TRT, and Press TV. And he is currently the correspondent for CGTN as well. And finally, Abdul Karim Hassan is a publisher and a founding member of Wadair News Media Group, a leading online magazine that caters to the Horn of Africa region. Abdul Karim formerly served as a senior consultant for the UNDP in Somalia as part of the Supporting Emerging Federal Member States program. So without further waiting, I'll open the floor to Dr. Holdan and then on to Abdi and Abdulaziz and then Abdul Karim.
So, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, Doctor.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that the issue that was heavy on the discussions were elections. But after I asked the one of your leaders to what is the main point we really want to talk about, this like peace, dialogue, and how to bring the country together. So I'm going to talk about peace and how it relates to post-economic reconstruction and a transition from war to peace and lack of conflict. As we all know, peace is a precondition for sustainable development. All actors should recognize and accept that political priorities will often constrain economic policy making. We could think about that reconstruction and peaceful coexistence requires a leadership and political will, in addition to the efforts to promote national reconciliation, transitional justice, and trauma healing. In addition to that, to build a peace, to build post-economic reconstruction, the priority is to build peace and peace is not only difficult to build, but like war has important economic and financial consequences. So basically, for us to think about how to create a dialogue for peace, how to create a dialogue for peaceful coexistence, political consensus, and all that, I have to think about the supremacy of law in doing that. So basically, what do we mean by supremacy of law? In the case of Somalia, we mean that good institutions are a prerequisite for enabling political, economic, and social environment. And if I can add a few of these that I feel like maybe it needs, or maybe it's a work in progress, is the supremacy of law. The previous debate talked about the conflict between the different groups, lack of political consensus, or why there is no prime minister at this point, why certain regions are not part of the political consensus, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, when I think about peace, I think about law, supremacy of law. I think about, in the case of Somalia, the lack of the constitutional court. Without, when countries are coming out from post-conflict, it really has to do with the institutional infrastructure. And mostly it's the case in Somalia, it's always a poor economic institution. So in any way that anybody is trying to attempt to reconcile and bring the country together, the only thing that can bring people together is when they see the law, and the law is equal to everyone. The other thing is enforcement of contracts. Whether it's the parliament, whether it's the political, private, this is very important. When we agree on something, and that it becomes very heavy on, especially for Somalia, when political groups come together, whether they are federal member states, whether they are opposition groups, civil societies, and the federal government, if we agree on something, it must be transparent, accountable, and the contract, whatever agreement, has to be enforced, and it has to be implemented. Why? Because we coming from civil war, we lost trust. We need to build trust by keeping our promises as we agreed on, and to make sure it's inclusive. And that means when it's inclusive, we own the process. And the process that's owned by all tend to be, even if it's not perfect. Look, maybe many of the attempts in the past to, especially during election, were not consistent with the constitution, the so-called constitution of Somalia, but it was a political consensus. So maybe we could not too much attach to, we can't attach too much into this is constitutional and not constitutional, but it has to be based on political consensus by all stakeholders, okay? So that is very important. Credibility and transparency, as I said, is very important. So for us, you can think about maybe three major things that I think I consider it's very important for peaceful Somalia: economic aspect, social aspect, and political aspect. Right now, we are talking about political aspects and it's an election year, along with a country that is somewhat coming out of post conflict. That's a very complicated. So things should be flexible, and it has to be also accountable and transparent. I think it's very important to have legitimate leadership, especially in coming to elections. And it's very important to also think about the peace dividend. As I said before, people are to believe that they have a stake in the success of the process, whether it's the economic process, whether it's the social process, whether it's the political process. So if they feel like they have a stake, and people need to identify peace with personal benefit also. Why? Because if they identify peace with personal benefit, that will outweigh the short costs that inevitably they have to bear. Unless people can reasonably expect large peace dividends as they move forward in the peace process, election process, economic reconstruction process, they will have no incentive to support whatsoever. One word I will have to say about the current process I mean, I could say it's a lot of uncertainty now that that people are talking about. But to me, the most important thing is for peace, long-lasting peace in Somalia, and not to revert the little gain we've made politically, socially, and economically. I think we have to do a few things. Number one is to really encourage trust building. The process has to be trusted. And how do we create a trust building in a country that's coming from civil war? Well, people have to be on the table where decisions are made. The process has to be also transparent, as I said, and accountable. And whoever is going to be implemented that process or enforced have to be accountable to all, not only to few. They also must be inclusive, and one has to feel that I own the process. I'm doing this for my country. I'm going forward with it. I don't want to revert back to conflict and mayhem and all things that comes with lack of consensus. Again, the most important, in short, is, as Mani said, is a political consensus. We can talk about a lot of economic issues, but it's very important. In terms of social issues, I think it's very important to think about election will happen every 4 years. So I always say politics and political disagreements and a lack of consensus will go on as long as human beings are in existence. But I think Somalia has to know that political consensus or lack thereof should not be post-economic reconstruction should not wait for a smooth political process. It will never be smooth. Business will not be as usual in Somalia. We are coming out from civil war. We are building consensus. We are building trust. In the meantime, though, there has to be a way that livelihood and disarmament, demobilization, reintegration of former combatants, return of refugees, all this must be concurrently moving on together. So the main point I'm trying to say is something that I think international communities and most Somali leaders, I think that evades is have we ever had a truth reconciliation, trauma healing, and social transitional justice in Somalia. I always find, whenever I think about, you can always entice love in 5 minutes. They will all love each other and hug each other and sign agreements, especially men. I have to say, the ones who are leading or sitting where decisions are made are Somali men. Somali women, who are 50% of the population, are missing in that. And therefore, we are missing 50% of the brains and the nurturing and contribution of women. So you can imagine, when you see the mayhem and the chaos and lack of agreements, where do the rest of the population, and that could include minorities, youth, and also disadvantaged, and so on. Everybody has a brain, everybody has something to contribute. And I think to build a peace in aggregate has to be inclusive, it has to be owned together, it has to be transparent and accountable, and it has to withstand in the eyes and the ears of an independent team that is not lenient or supporting another group. So basically, also another thing I want to mention, because I did talk about economic issues, the issue of allocation of resources, particularly a country like Somalia, which all think that it's a resource-rich country. The most difficult political and economic decision policymakers have to make is how to design and implement a strategy for economic reconstruction that is fair, that is also transparent, and that does not discriminate whether a state is a deficit state or whether the state is a surplus state. An economic plan that unites the people. Some people think that clan is the most problem in Somalia. I think it's the resource issue. We have resource sharing issues, and I think while we talk about elections, and election is the most imminent and the problematic issue now we see, but also we need to think about post-economic reconstruction, and one that is designed and framed to help Somalia not to create more mayhem, but to establish more accountability, inclusivity, fair resource sharing, and a model and formula that is good for all. As an economist, I'm sure there is always, you cannot make everybody happy, but at least in the eyes of the people, something that people feel like, okay, it's mine. Maybe even if my brother is having a little bit more, at least I'm getting my fair share. And so equity and accountability is very important. I'm very happy that Ambassador Habib has announced that the Finance Committee, which consists of the federal member states and the Minister of Finance of the federal government, have come to an agreement. They have been working together. I myself have done a lot of work in resource sharing, but the issue is always the constitution. And we have a constitution that doesn't say enough on resource sharing. I think there might be one article, and it all says to be determined. But then we are going to all sorts of problems and resource sharing issues that even cause problems, because these ministers who have worked a little bit better together and met in Kismayo, met in Garowe, but then whenever the political system, there is a deadlock, then they all don't meet and the things get stagnated and all the economic issues get stuck. So all in all, I think I was told that I only have 1 minute to contribute, but I just wanted to mention for election now, we are heading elections, and for election to take place, especially Somalia, that's a fragile economically, politically, and socially. Is it possible that we will have, given the time constraint we are facing and the models that has been proposed, I think I concur with Halima Yare that given the complexity and financial requirement, I don't see any. And even if you add the lack of political agreements, whether it's not all the regional states are and federal are in agreement, but also, and maybe in a deadlock, but also opposition groups, and also the elections to happen on time doesn't seem to be realistic to me, but what is realistic to me is this. Even if you think about the last government, that Hassan Sheikh, there was a 5 months extension. But it was a political consensus. Yes, it had nothing to do with the constitution. It was a political consensus that they all come together, the civil societies, the regional member states, and the federal government, and they devise a mechanism. They come up with a model that at least was somewhat workable. And that's why the election of 2016 happened. And I think the same thing can happen, whether that will be an extension or whether the election will happen on time, which unless miracle happens. But the point I'm trying to make is, without political consensus, without the agreement of upper house and the lower house, without a transparent process, without a universal vote registry and no consensus, I think different models can be implicated or advocated or even proposed. But I think the thing that I would like to, without being very political, which I really don't want to be, I think Somali men or Somali leaders need to come to their senses, forget about their self-interested or electability or egos, and lead the country a way forward where things can happen in a consensus, transparent, inclusive, and that the process is owned by all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Holden. And we'll go now to Abdi.
Is that me?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that the video was not on, but it's okay.
Okay.
Abdi.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Andrew, and your team, Africa Department of Lucy, for hosting this wonderful and very important and timely session. I also thank all protocols observed for all the participants and all the guests in the panel. Andrew, you asking us $64 million question. If I knew the solution for Somali dialogue process and how to bring back Somali society into dialogue, I'll be a very rich man. But I will try. I didn't prepare no speech. I didn't write anything down. Everything I'm saying is on top of my head. And also, I am not a political man. So I'll just talk. And creating an environment for dialogue to be possible in Somalia, it goes back to what Dr. Holden just has said, which is reconciliation. Reconciliation means that you are able and trust the tribal society at the other side or the other town, that you are able to go and you are confident that you will be able to be there peacefully, and you leave your local tribe behind or your local city behind. That could only happen, in my opinion, if we do bottom-up, grassroots level reconciliation in a larger scale of the country. I'll give you an example. Many people ask me, who do you support in Somali politics? What I often reply or answer on that question is, when I see a Somali politician who openly and publicly asks Somali public, what do we do about the arms and weapons in our hands, in the households of large number of Somali public? Why do they still keep these weapons? because they know things could flare up at any given moment. That shows you that there is no trust between the communities, even though they are living together. And there is still that barrier for a dialogue to happen, for that person to accept what a politician says, and when he comes or she comes to a podium and says, what do we do? The AK-47s in our households. When will that person be ready to say, Mr. President or Mr. Prime Minister, I'm willing to bring this gun wherever you tell me to bring? They will only do that when they trust that nobody is gonna harm them, or no tribe is gonna raid their city or attack them. That could only happen, in my opinion, if we start a long process of reconciliation from grassroots level, from a small village level, up to the major cities. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think international community and foreign actors, by the way, Somalia is overcrowded place. By overcrowded, I mean there are a lot of interests. A lot of countries are interested in that, have interest on that country. And there's a reason for that. Somalis are not naive. We know the importance of our country. We know where we geographically lie in this on the planet. We know what resources are there in our country, and we know why we are overcrowded. For those international community members who were helping us for a long time and still want to help us, we could say, let's move the clock very fast and create an institutions that can function. Because when I had a breakfast with the Somali foreign minister, which I don't want to name, when I asked him, what is the biggest problem facing your ministry? He said, technocrats. He said he doesn't have no technocrats. Build the capacity of these young people like Maka and on this panel. Build their capacity so they could be fully leading a department in a government system. Train them quickly. Give young people skills so that they can avoid migrating to Europe and going through all these deserts and these seas, and they dying. Make them feel that they have something to do here, that they are valuable in this country. And I think reconciliation is the most important thing I could say. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Abdulaziz?
Thank you very much, Andrew, and the entire RUSI department. Thank you also to our participants and all protocols observed. It's a great honor to be part of this important dialogue. I must admit, this is the first time that somebody or an institution is trying to seek my opinion on Somalia and the future for Somalia. For a matter of fact, just to set the record straight, I've never seen a stable Somalia. I was born after the collapse of the Somali government. So it's quite an honor to get all these insights from all of you veterans who've lived to see a Somali government. And I'm also longing to see a Somali government probably in the next 10, 20 years. Probably if I don't get to see it, my children get to see it. So technically, I've been a journalist in Somalia for over a decade now. That's when I started my journalism career. But when we talk about reconciliation, as Abdul Musa was saying, the approach in which reconciliation takes place in Somalia is an issue that needs to be addressed properly. There's so much mistrust among communities and clans. So we see every other time, once a leader comes to the podium, the first issue they say what the country needs is reconciliation. A couple of months later, they hold a massive conference. They bring elders, they bring young people, they bring women, or these events take place simultaneously. Maybe we have a women reconciliation conference, or maybe a youth summit, or another elder summit. One of the issues that I've noted as a journalist while going to all these events, one is the criteria in which those people are attending the event itself have been picked, because you tend to find that some communities say that the people representing us at these reconciliation conferences, they're not genuine people. Even when you talk about the elections, there are concerns that the elders who are going to elect members of parliament or who are going to elect the electoral delegates themselves might have been compromised either by one way or another. You see some clan elders say that the elders were replaced by other elders. So that itself is a big question. And the way Abdul Musa was saying, it's the kind of approach that reconciliation is taking place. It needs to be top to bottom. And it should not be just one clan that is meeting to decide its own fate, and then you're saying that the reconciliation phase has happened. But we need national reconciliation. All those people who have grievances should find an equal, should come to the podium, have an equal say so that they can air their grievances. There are some clans that still 60 years of independence in Somalia, but still feel that they are still not part of the system. Their properties get looted. They don't have enough members of parliament in parliament. They don't have officials in government who can lobby for their agenda. So that itself, as long as we have that kind of approach, then reconciliation is will hit a dead end. We also have a system in Somalia called 4.5. It involves 4 predominant clans and minority clans. Unless that is abolished, I don't think everyone in Somalia will feel equal, because one of the criteria right now in Somalia is a prime minister, and the PM has to come from a particular clan. You see, that is the biggest challenge now. I cannot vie for the post of the PM, even though I am extremely probably qualified to vie for this position. It belongs to a particular clan. So power dynamics in Somalia needs to be abolished. I need to vie for a seat in parliament or a senate or the presidency from whichever region that I come from. Power should not just be based from a particular clan, or maybe the president is related to me. That means I'm out of there. I cannot join politics because I have a representative there. So that is one end. And also creating a stable Somalia. Elders have been talking time and again, and even the leaders, on the importance of youth, who are the future of tomorrow. The question is, which tomorrow are they talking about? Because every other 4 years, a leader will come and say the future belongs to the youth. And we are still here. We're seeing them. They come, they go, they come, they go. They keep on saying that the future belongs to the youth. So Dusamareb 3, for instance, was the decision that was reached there for indirect elections came as a blow, especially to young people in Somalia, especially us, the youth, because we were optimistic that elections will be held on one man, one vote, even though it has its own challenges. In that capacity, I can be able to challenge for a seat in parliament or senate without the fear of me feeling that I don't have the money to vie for office. But with the 301 delegates, then I cannot compete with a person from my own clan who is a businessman, who is very rich, or who enjoys a lot of support, maybe from the government, or maybe from a foreign government that is pumping his campaign. So I don't stand a chance in the current Somalia politics, or in the upcoming Somalia politics either. So unless the indirect elections is abolished, 4.5 formula is abolished, and the minority clans are given a say, I don't think Somalia will have justice. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Abdulaziz. Abdul Karim.
Hello, thanks, Dr. Andrew and the Rusi Institute, as well as my fellow panelists. Creating space for dialogue is an important aspect of the Somali political space. The devastating civil war in Somalia after the collapse of the military regime in 1991, primarily based on clan fighting, has caused the destruction and the death of many lives. Many people fled the country while others left their homes and sought refuge in peaceful areas within the country as internally displaced people. Today we have 2.7 million people that are internally displaced within Somalia. Rebuilding a country is primarily about relationship, as restoring people's trust and confidence in governance systems and rule of law, rebuilding relationships at all levels and providing the communities with greater hope for the future. In a post-conflict society such as Somalia, peace building is embedded in creation of space for dialogue. Somalis are known as an oral society who have solved their issues in the past under a tree. Many conflicts, crimes, and complex issues were in fact handled under the shade of a tree by only those men. That was traditional space Somalis used and still use to address complex issues that confront them. Conflict in Somalia results from political as well as socioeconomic imbalance. There is a loss of livelihoods, fractured social networks, and collapse of institutions. I think Holland talked about that. She has the authority on such topics. The Somali fragmentation has destroyed the social, cultural, political, and economic fabric of society. Therefore, social and economic aspect of the conflict cannot be denied, nor not only it's an aggravating factor to the violence and stability, but can also undermine a sustainable peace if not dealt with properly, and chances of relapse is even there. Peace building in Somalia in the aftermath of conflict has been approached through traditional elders and politicians to address conflicts and political disagreements. But instead of under the shade of tree, this time in air-conditioned hotel halls, but as in the past, however, often lacks inclusivity, excluding some segments of citizens such as women, youth, IDPs, and marginalized tribes who are not given much voice nor understood in a meaningful way. For instance, not only the marginalized tribes are neglected from participating in political space and social activities, but they are also unprotected during or when there's a conflict. Space for dialogue must be inclusive and encouraging, so segments of society often left out, such as women, youth, and marginalized groups excluded, are on the table of the dialogue. It's also important that the space must be one where apathy and frustration leads to purpose, responsibility, and involvement. Building bridges between opposing parties is critical, like everybody was stressing, with the use of peace connectors rather than dividers, and promoters that includes traditional and religious leaders, women, and business people to build trust and confidence for better conflict resolution and having strong, impactful dialogue. Somalia politics continue to be shaped by differences between political players, such as the federal governments, we heard today that, and federal member states. The federal government of Somalia and the federal member states are still at odds over the issue of the constitution, federalism, election models, security, and resource sharing. Currently, this is most evident in the ongoing disagreement and the contentious issue on the federal system and the election 2021. Somalia's protracted instability stems from lack of will, political inclusivity, cooperation, and progress toward peace, security, and development, widespread corruption, weak governance systems, and the absence of capacities and resources, as well as outside influence. I believe a lasting peace could be only achieved when parties come to the table with good faith, safeguard and respect the rule of law, the constitution, and the federal system, be prepared to compromise with win-win situation, an inclusive political settlement, an attitude to accommodate each other, and commitment to implement the agreed upon outcomes, as well as addressing the unemployment and socioeconomic issues. Space of dialogue need to come from deep will of the people and the institutions that represent the people. More importantly, to listen to each other, including the small voices, with open mind and compromise for the greater good for the country, while adhering to the rule of law, the constitution, and principles of federalism. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Abdul Karim. We've all, I guess there's a certain, we've all mentioned, all the panelists have mentioned various different aspects. So strengthening laws, building trust, stake in the process, reconciliation at the village and local level, to youth and their involvement, and indirect elections being abolished. But I guess the question for me, really at the heart of this is the current system that we have in place fit for purpose? And if it's not, then what alternative systems should Somalia be looking for? away from what we currently have. In particular, I'm focusing more here on the clan-based system. Yes, it's part of Somali tradition and its heritage, but if this is ultimately the thing that is holding back Somalians, as well as other aspects that people have mentioned, international community and regional players, as we know, how do we move things forward beyond this? So I'll go to Dr. Holden, and then I'll proceed to Abdi. Dr. Holden, you're muted at the moment. Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank everybody who have organized this and who's participating. To be very frank, we have opportunity that we lost because it is just few months before the current government's mandate expires. And to talk about election models at this point is just recipe for me for either extension or recipe for disaster. The point is, yes, 4.5 is very problematic. It was a solution at the time. It has outlived its mandate. As Abdikarim talked about, Somalia were in a very bad situation, but 4.5 was solution. But then I remember something called Garowe Principle 1. The issue of 4.5 was also discussed. And at the time, Farole, the president of Puntland, refused to accept the 4.5. But then when there was kind of a deadlock, the prime minister at the time, Sheikh Sharif Hassan, all these political stakeholders, Galmudug was the only, and Puntland were the only state, they all agreed that at this time, let's just do it, and then we put it on the constitution or whatever the agreement, that it will never come back. And then again, it happened in 2016, and so on and so on. My worry is for Somali political leaders, whether they are in the past or in the future or now, why do we talk about 4.5 and it's distasteful and a bad impact right now? Election models should have been contemplated, talked about, refined. So at this point, few months before election time, yes, 4.5 is very problematic. It's not inclusive. Women and youth and minority lost, even though 0.5 is very bad and distasteful also, that we say one group is 0.5 instead of 5 will have been even better, regardless of how bad the whole clan-based political system is. Now, I think if Somalis come to the table and agree on transparent and really willingness to work together, they can come together without pointing fingers at each other, a political model or election model that will be short run, but at least given the time constraints we have, that can satisfy and maybe look at the drawbacks of the 4.5 and indirect elections, but also think about untenable one person, one vote that people are talking about. One person, one vote is a great aspiration for Somali people. We love to have that, but with the current time, I think about Somaliland, and when they started, I think one is only they had the parliamentarians were elected as one person, one vote, but absolutely it took many years to implement, to organize, to reconcile different groups. So it's very tedious process. It requires logistics, it requires a photo registration, it requires census, it requires peace that some regions are now, even if you dislodge Al-Shabaab, it needs, as the Halimeri said, that it needs a lot of resources and manpower and logistics. So as much as I love to say, I love one person, one vote, what does it really require now? Does it require an extension? Is there a brains that can come up with a model that's workable, that doesn't have the system? If I read it correctly, the Dusama Rep 3, I thought it was, to me, it was, I was confused. Maybe it's just me. because there is a point that talks about direct, indirect, it talks about one person, one vote, talks about one person, one vote. So all this confusion can be eliminated and mitigated if the people who have the authority, election engineers and technocrats, need to be on the table, not people who are self-interested in the process, who want to sway the process in their way. So regardless of who, we need the people with authority, who have experts in this field to come together, given the short time constraint, to come up with a model. And that model might require extension, might require elections to happen on time, but it has to be based on political consensus that's agreed upon by all stakeholders. Thank you.
Brilliant, Abdi. Sorry.
And thank you, Andrew, again. And the way forward on 4.5, and I think the way forward is multi-party system. But multi-party system need this societal change, i.e., I could say we could run a very clever public relation campaign, educating people what elections are and what rights they might get if they elected their own representatives in local government or the federal government, their MB as well. But for me, as a local fisherman or a local district level man, and how do I trust your party when you are not from my clan is the question that will be in the hearts of many Somalis. And I'm being very honest here. So to change the perception about elections of the society is paramount, so that they know what it means to elect somebody rather than what it means to select somebody from their tribe and send it to the local legislature. And that goes back to the reconciliation I was talking about earlier. But I think a multi-party system is the way forward. I would have a very good suggestion and use it on this platform for the first time. I really want to publish this, but I will say this here now. And because there's this polarization and tribal mistrust, and political parties many Somali people see as affiliated. Maybe there is a clan that has got 10 political parties, or maybe 5, and I can name some. So when a clan have got, simple clan have got 5 political parties, what does that mean is a politician is with an ego who doesn't agree with their fellow man or woman who is the party leader within their clan, wants to establish his own because I don't want you under your leadership. And that shows you how self-interested people are, rather than even the same clan come together and say, listen, let's advance what is good for our clan, and let's establish a clan of a part of our own, that we all go under this umbrella. That doesn't happen because every person wants to be on their own, because in politics in Somalia, it's not a copy and paste, and it's not a textbook as it is in some other countries. So if you think you are from the United Nations or UNDP and you solve it some other countries and you want to copy and paste and apply that reconciliation and that state building to Somalia, it's not easy. What do you do with, when we talk about security, what do you do with non-state actors who are armed? All tribes have got weapons. If there's a war in Mogadishu now, tribes can force even AMISOM out. Everywhere is like that. Not only Mogadishu, every city is like that. Every tribe is armed to teeth. What do you do with that? Why are still people not coming into each other and contacting each other and simply because there's lack of trust. So the way forward is multi-party system. I'll share this idea first of time on Rusi session. Can we say this? And if Halima is Her Excellency is with us, I think I would love her to entertain this idea. Because of all these political parties, can we say when the first time a one person, one vote is being held in Somalia, and people directly elected their MPs, can we say the 3 or 4 or maybe 5 top vote winners parties will only be officially legitimized to be political parties in Somalia? Otherwise, it's going to be chaos, because now how many parties have been registered, political and temporary political parties are being registered, and they're growing in number. So if I disagree with, for example, Southwest London, my local MP, I can have my own party and run. It's not on. I mean, it's not something that's viable. So can the current leaders entertain the idea? Let's say the 5 most vote winners of the first time one person, one vote election that happened in Somalia will be legitimized as the only legitimate parties in Somalia. That could limit this too many parties. Back to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Abdulaziz and then Abdul Karim. Can we try and keep it down to 30, 45 seconds?
I'm sorry. Okay, it was too much.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone else. I think I tend to agree with Dr. Holden. 4.5 formula was reached in Djibouti a couple of decades ago, I think 2 decades ago. And I think the system is still alive in Somalia for one reason, because the proponents of this system are the same people who are still in power. They're still in power at the presidency level, at the premiership level, and still in parliament, and in all decision-making organs. And the fact that they're still there, they will tend to push for this system to remain in place so that they can have their way. And for the Dusamareb event, for instance, those who are supporting indirect elections, according to analysts and according to young people, what they think in Somalia is these are people who don't stand a chance of getting re-elected. And the only way that they can come to power again is if the clan elder has the final say in forming the next electoral college that will pick these member of parliament. So I think 4.5 formula has outlived its mandate, and it's time for it to be completely abolished. For instance, if we talk about clan politics, I hail from a clan that comes from northeastern Somalia. So because I'm from that particular clan, we are allowed to only have 1 member of parliament. We don't have a representation in the Senate. So we are supposed to follow this single member of parliament for the next 4 years. So if there's any challenge, and we cannot get him out of there because he came back through the clan elder system, and we have to follow them. I cannot challenge him because I feel like I can contest for that seat. He has the funds, he has the political will, maybe enjoys the backing from the state, or maybe from foreign agents. So abolishing this system itself is very important, and it will face many hurdles because many want this system to remain in place for their own agendas, for their own reasons. So if it is abolished completely, and then the local civilians can be able to vote in the upcoming elections, at least people can feel that they have a say in the government that is in place. I can feel happy that I elected this member of parliament. But if he came in through clan elders, then he can tell me, who am I? I have no power over him. So we'll just go to the clan elders and tell him to silence me. And you know, there's so many non-state actors in Somalia. So it's best you don't even challenge these people on camera. Sometimes you just have to challenge them in other ways, because there's so many non-state actors in Somalia, and also there's no also security assurance for those who are going to take part in these elections. That's why I was interested in hearing from Her Excellency, Madam Halima, on how secure these electoral venues will be, because I am a journalist. I've reported countless number of deaths of electoral delegates, are also candidates who also vied for this position. So it's quite important that they are also secured so that we don't lose lives again.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Andrew. I think what's today Somalia, if you look at it, tribes are not fighting anymore. What are really fighting is politicians that are in power. So Somalis actually are lacking leadership that are genuine to take Somalia to the next step. What is one person, one vote, or so on and so forth, or economic recovery and development. If you look at this current government, I will be really, as you advised, be frank, but be diplomatic. They have been there for almost three and a half years, or a little bit more than that. And they haven't done anything to prepare the country for one person, one food. To expect one person, one food to happen in Somalia means an extension of a government that failed already for the past 3.5 years to be still in power. So there must be some sort of, like most of the panelists were saying, some political agreement between the leaders, be it the FMS state, level or the federal government. Last time they have actually talked, if you look at it, was 2.5 years ago. And you can see there's no political will and there's no respect for constitutions or the system that Somalia took and embraced, with the federalism. So I will put the tribes and clans aside. We should really focus on bringing those politicians and the leaders together as they are trying to do this to solve the issue of modalities come December and February. And moving forward, there has to be some enhanced sort of a political agreement, be it 2016 enhancement or some other formalities that they can agree on. But whoever is thinking that one person, one vote will happen in Somalia means an extension of the current government that has already failed and haven't done anything. Thank you. Back to you.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got a few questions, and I'm going to take those questions, and I'm going to ask the participants or panel participants keep that to at least 30 seconds, quick, to the point. The first question is, several panelists have suggested that Somalia is a post-conflict environment, or that we've come out of this idea of war, yet conflicts continue in much of Somalia. Why did the panelists believe we are in a post-conflict space? Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Sure,
I agree with the person who was asking the question. Yes, Somalia is not all out of the post-conflict. Yes, there are regions that are somewhat out, and there are regions that are not. If you remember the way Somalia was divided, when we have the two, I did used to be dual track policy. And because of the dual track policy, economic reconstruction was moving on with Puntland and Somaliland. And South Central had a different post. It's not post because there are regions that are still cannot be called post. So I agree with the person who's asking the question that yes, we're not all out of the war, but regardless, say if, for example, if Puntland or maybe Galmudug is ahead of the other states, it's not a lost situation. We cannot keep all the states in the same pace because they have a different stages of development and different stages of conflict. So those who are either having less conflict and get it and are into the development, they should be prioritized as a post-conflict and should be given the post-economic reconstruction strategy they need based on their stage of development. On the other hand, look at new states who are just trying to assess themselves, trying to maybe coming out of the war with Al-Shabaab, or if still some swaths of that regions are still ruled by Al-Shabaab, those also will need a different economic strategy. We actually call it, it could be like almost second degree development, post-development economic reconstruction strategy that can have can be fair, but at the same time look into the different developmental stage that each state is on. So I agree with the person, and I think some of the international community already are aware of that and provide support based on their need assessment.
Brilliant. Abdi Karim, I'm going to go to you, then I'm going to ask the next question.
No, I'm just being very quick. Somalia is still, I could still consider Somalia as a conflict nation because geographically, there are many places in Somalia that are still in conflict, active conflicts. And if Somalia was not in a conflicted nation, we wouldn't have 20,000 AMISOM troops, by the way. So Somalia is still considered and that's very true. How do we get out of it? Of course, it needs a plan. I mean, it needs a long-term plan, a short-term plan, SNA, Somali National Army to be trained, AMISOM embargo to be lifted, even monitored if they want to, lifted, train and actively Somali National Army, liberate where Shabab control is, and then take it from there. Thank you. Back to you.
Abdul Karim?
Yes, go ahead.
Did you want to jump in, or I'll move to the next question?
Next question.
So the next question is really about, it says the literacy is key for political, economic, and social stability. Dr. Holden seeks, what are the main barriers now to increasing literacy in primary education from one of the lowest rates in Africa?
Well, of course, education is the passport for success. But you know what your government can do is to provide basic services such as education, health, and other important services. As you know, Somali education, 99% of it is private. And we know that from educational point of view, education cannot be private because you're almost excluding a large number of the people who are unable to pay. So that requires, again, a strong government with strong institutions. And one of the things that I alluded at the beginning of my talk is, okay, 20 years we've been considered, whether it's transitional or normal government as a government, but all our priority, all our eggs we put into the political basket. We haven't provided education, and a great example of the lack of health. Even though they're trying, but there's no strategy for providing social services. And because there is no mechanism for collecting taxes, people are not also paying taxes. So we can't just blame the government. So it's a holistic approach of looking at the post-economic reconstruction, or even economic, when we are in conflict. Education now should be a priority, health should be a priority. But what I see now in every aspect or everywhere in the world, in Somalia, and not in the world, in Somalia, I see that people are prioritizing politics and not thinking about, but it is very important. We have, even though parents and some private institutions are trying to play the role of the government in enhancing education, whether it's primary, elementary, middle school, high school, or university level. But I can't emphasize more that this is what the government can do for their youth, to enhance education, to make sure that everyone, especially elementary K1 through 12, that everyone have access to education, good education that is free. And that is not true right now. It doesn't exist now, but I hope that in the next time, this will be something that can be prioritized.
So Andrew, if I may say a few words about that.
Just quickly, yes.
Okay, I believe, yes, access to education is very basic and important for Somalia particularly, because over 65% of Somalis are youth. And if those youth don't have education, then we're talking about a lost generation for the next 20, 30, 50 years come. So it's really important. But like Onan said, most of the Somali education is based on private sector. And the role of the government is lacking, whether it's oversight or whether it's curriculum development and that sort of stuff. If you look at the central government, the federal government, and some federal member states are actually in agreement of how to have such access to education. There is some sort of federal government entrenching into what's should have been a local managed education. So there is some sort of a disconnect between the federal and federal member states. I think if you look at the private sector, although they filled the gap that the federal government or the federal member states were supposed to have to provide access to education, but still, if you look at it, you see the quality is masses over quality, where they're looking at it from a profit point of perspective, where there's no government interventions. And I hope that at least the federal governments and the federal member states will build institutions to make sure that at least they have an oversight and there is a curriculum, a development, and sort of stuff. Thank you. Back to you.
Brilliant. Okay, so last question, and I'm going to ask everyone just to take pretty much 30 seconds to 45 seconds, please, to answer this question. So the last question really is about dialogue. We've spoken about dialogue, trust, the reversal of trust amongst those locals, upwards, political stability. But what we haven't spoken about is whether there should be dialogue now with non-state armed groups, and in particular, I hasten to say that Al-Shabaab as well. Should we now be looking at having a dialogue with terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab or other local groups that exist in Somalia?
I would, and Abdul Musa, I would. If I was the president of Somalia today, I would actually seek to talk to Al-Shabaab. After all, some sections of Al-Shabaab are Somali people. After all, they are killing Somali people and we are killing them. So talking to them will not be a strange thing to do, really. But the process of talking to them should have started somewhere. And there are young, very young, radicalized young people within the Al-Shabaab and contingent. And talking to them means, it's all about perception, changing the perceptions of what they've been told to believe. And that needs a campaign with a professional public relation campaign teams to engage what medium that we convey that message to. Who do they listen? When do they listen? And what format of text or message do they listen? I am sure if we engage in that professional manner and have a structural and phased way of dealing with them, I think we win over the hearts and minds of some of these young people. If you tell them, if you do this and that and this and that, we're gonna give you this and this, and you make the and you keep that promise, as Dr. Hodon was saying, they will come to you, to your way. So back to you.
Abdulaziz?
Well, Andrew, thank you. That's a very important question. And for somebody who's been covering non-state actors and the militant groups like Al-Shabaab and the Islamic State in Somalia, I think dialogue should be a part of, it should be on the table. I cannot completely rule it out, but it should be on the table, but under some conditions. One, as long as Al-Shabaab controls territory in Somalia, that it can be able to lure fighters, it can be able to train fighters, it can be able to carry out attacks at will in Mogadishu and any other part of the country. It continues to target US forces, African forces, Somali troops, as long as they still have the firepower and the ability to carry out these kind of attacks, they will not accept a reconciliation or talks with the government. A second aspect is we have seen some top Al-Shabaab commanders surrender to the Somali government, and they've not been treated well. One of them is Abu Mansour, Mukhtar Robo Abu Mansour. He is the former de facto leader of Al-Shabaab, the second in command and one of the group's leaders. Once he came back to the government, he was given liberty to move around. And when he declared that he is running for political office, he was arrested and nobody has ever heard from him again. So this tends to push back the element of talks from the government, because they will argue that we might go Mukhtar Robo's way. So until that is abolished, and then until Al-Shabaab is decimated militarily, that's when we can think of a political way and talks to bring them on board.
Abdul Karim, and then we'll go to Dr. Hoda.
Yeah, I would say yes, but it has to be some sort of both parties have to be open-minded and come to the table with no preconditions. And we proved that from even if you look at the US and the Western countries couldn't defeat the Afghanis Taliban's, and Somalia hasn't had that chances. let alone strong military that can take over Al-Shabaab. So there has to be some sort of a dialogue, open, but there has to be some sort of a political will to agree on win-win situation scenarios. Thank you. Back to you.
And Dr. Holden, you have the final word.
Okay, to build Somali national allegiance, not based on religion, region, or clan, we need to resolve in a deep way the issue of reconciliation and trust building. We need to think about issues of transitional justice and trauma healing, disarmament, demobilization, reintegration of former combatants. I do agree that there should be a dialogue. Dialogue should be open at all times to everyone. So Al-Shabaab, majority of them are Somalis, they're Somali youth who've been brainwashed, but they have to have the proper mechanism. You can't just agree with them and start talking to them and integrate them straight to the society. They need the proper rehabilitation. They need the proper teaching. They need to be brainwashed again, reverse brainwashing. But I definitely think that there should be given a chance, especially those who are on the borderline, who might be willing to break out with them. That's what I think. But I think we need to build the tools to reinvent Somali national allegiance.
Brilliant. So we've come to the end of this session, and we could continue talking about many of these issues all day long. But I would like to thank our speakers, Dr. Hodan Saeed, Abdi Muse, Abdulaziz Bilal Ali, Abdul Karim Hassan, and our speakers from the first panel, Her Excellency Halima Ibrahim, Mohammed Mulam, Abdinissa Ismail, Makamus, and Ambassador Malam as well. Thank you for joining our Africa sessions, and we hope that you will join us soon on other Africa sessions that we have planned coming up. Take care.
Will you be sharing the link with us? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.